every single one of us wants more freedom. It's human, it's universal. We might think about it differently, like financial freedom or location freedom, but ultimately, human beings like want to feel like you can move how you want to move. This is why through eons of stories of people being oppressed, they fight so hard for their liberation to be able to survive and then thrive. And in this world where some things feel existential right now, like AI, and what does that mean for human potential and labor and skills? What good are humans if you have technology that's quote, quote, better than you, right? And so it's so important for us to not lose touch with what makes us human, right? This desire for freedom is one of the core fundamental things. But understanding that at different phases of our life and what specifically we're after is really important, because oftentimes if we grew up a certain way, we can end up chasing the antidote to that our whole lives. So many people who grew up poor and unable to put food on it, or families who couldn't put food on the table, or you just simply couldn't buy the things you wanted to buy and you felt restricted in some way, especially if you were around other people that had the means. You can spend your whole life chasing money, but that's all you do. You're chasing if you don't know what you're trying to attain on the other side. And there's different kinds of freedom. There's different elements of freedom too that serve different facets of our lives. And I chase different things at different stages. I mean, I'm a random person on the internet, but what I can say is I have basically chased every dream that I've had and gotten it since I was pretty much 10. Every dream job that I've wanted, I've gotten. Every kind of vision of life that I ideated at different stages, whether in my 20s or 30s, I got it. And it's not because I'm special. It's not because I have some crazy skill set. And no, I don't have a course to share with you. I have some key ideas and some frameworks, but it's honestly really simple. It's about understanding what at the core matters to you and who do you want to be. It's truly that simple. However, at different phases of life, we evolve and we want different things, right? And freedom was something that I understood I had always wanted. I didn't have the words maybe when I was a kid, when I was 10 and 15, and maybe even in my 20s. But I developed a language later on. When I look back, I can see the different freedoms that I was chasing at different phases. And I'll share the different phases in case that presents a potential, like, not either mirror or just a few different key concepts that frame up how you can think about the different freedoms that you've chased and what you really need now. But every single one of us, it usually starts with some core experiences that we had that formulated our understanding of what we needed to survive in this world, how we needed to navigate this world so that we could live and flourish. And when I was young, like, we were very middle class. We didn't worry, we had food on the table, so that wasn't a major concern. And my mom was a single parent and worked super hard. And so we had that stability, even as an immigrant family, which I'm so grateful for. The thing that I felt acutely, though, wasn't a lack of finances, or necessarily even a lack of, location independence. I felt a lack of like emotional freedom, of mental freedom, because I grew up in a household where right was right today and then it could be wrong tomorrow. Like, this is right, number one is right, and then number two could be right tomorrow, and then you're like, wait, but I thought it was number one. It's like, no, today's number two, because it's dependent on how an adult felt that day, how their emotional state was, what other stressors they were dealing with that day. And so when you're dealing with that much uncertainty mentally every single day, it's like, holy fuck, like, what is right today? What is wrong today? How do I not get in trouble today? And any given moment, I felt like I could say the wrong thing. I could express the wrong thing. And I learned from a really young age to be very careful about what I said and what I expressed, which sucked because you're just like constantly in this like kind of restricted, constrained, stressed state. Because A, you don't want to get in trouble, but more importantly, like, you recognize that you can't survive on your own as a kid, right? You need help. Like, you need others to provide for you. So you're constantly trying to make sure, like, yes, you're loved, but essentially that translates to safety, that you are safe. And at 10, and I feel so lucky I realized this at 10, I realized that I could not win this game because the rules changed almost every day. If not maybe not every day, every week, but sometimes it changed every day. And I didn't have mental freedom. And so I don't know if it was like a moment in time, but I remember very distinctly at some point, I was like, I have to just go after what I want. And what I want is to be like in basketball because I loved basketball and I wasn't allowed to play it because I was a girl. And then it was like, okay, how can I be in basketball? And I'm told I have to like chase the top job. So the top job in basketball is commissioner of the NBA because I didn't play. And so I didn't ever see a path where I could play basketball. But I was like, oh, I could lead the league that literally organizes basketball. And it's like such a simple 10-year-old thought, but it was before elementary school. So I know I was 10 or younger. And I was like, this is what I'm going to be. Not a doctor, not some lawyer, not a banker as like all the things my mom wanted me to be. But I was like, no, I can say, and I'm going to start saying that I want to be commissioner of the NBA. And that was a really distinct moment where I was like, I can state this, I can own this, and I don't care if I get in trouble. And essentially, it came down to the fact that you own your own freedom. You have to create the pathways to your own freedom. And that I didn't think about it I didn't connect it to all these other realms of freedom that I could potentially create for myself. I just knew that I felt mentally and emotionally constrained, that the things that I said were constantly critiqued or yelled at or I'd get in trouble. And thus, I had to find a way to break out of that because I was being constrained by that. And so it basically I had to get to a point where I was like, fuck the consequences. I don't care if I get in trouble. I don't care if I get yelled at. I don't care if I'm punished because the way that I'm trying to play the game by your rules isn't working. And so I have to break out and play by my own rules. Not because I had some sense of I knew better, simply because I was like, I don't know how to win this game and I cannot survive it, so I must find another way to survive. And that's when I realized I started cultivating my mental and emotional freedom from the authority that was my mom, a parent, the authority that like dominated my life in terms of what I had to do, the grades I had to get, the jobs, the careers I had to consider, the schools I had to get into. I started to think like I had to make the choices. I had to decide for myself and I had to own it and I had to fight for it. But I didn't think about starting with a different freedom because I wasn't restricted by other freedoms as much as I was by the mental freedom. And so starting age 10 through probably college, 21, 22, that's what I was fighting against. Authority from my parents, authority from teachers, authority from the larger society around what I needed to pursue. And to really test how I can start to create my own liberation and independence from these ideas from other people that didn't actually factor me in. They don't have to live my life. I'm the person that's responsible for living my life. So what do I need to do? How do I want to live it? And then in my 20s, as I started to make my own money, I was like, oh shit, okay, this is what financial responsibility looks like. Actually, I started figuring that out because I started working in college and getting my own credit card and needing to pay that off. And realizing I'm like, I don't want to be in financial debt. And very fortunately, my family didn't grow up with a lot of debt that I knew of, aside from maybe like a mortgage or a car loan. We weren't in the hole and we weren't, constantly like at risk of defaulting. But what I did see was, immigrant family, we were super frugal and saved everything we could, reuse Ziploc bags, those kinds of things. And I saw that my mom's way of dealing with stress was to shop, retail therapy. And I knew I didn't like that. And I don't know what registered when I was younger, all the specific things, but generally I understood that I was like, she was buying more than she needed. She didn't need all the clothes because there would be things that didn't have labels. Ooh, I just kicked the chair. I kicked the table. She would have things sorry, not didn't have labels, but she would have clothes that still had labels on for months, years, untouched. And so I grew this mentality of like, I want to have enough to live the life that I want to live, but I do not want to overspend. And especially as I started to earn my own money, pay rent, pay bills, and I was making like $32,000 out of school because sports pays nothing. And that's when I got my first dream job, by the way. I applied for one job out of college to the National Basketball Association. I got it. And I was, in theory, on my way to like being commissioner. But at that point, I was like, oh, I want to create more financial freedom for myself because not because I had a whole bunch of things to buy, but because I was like, eventually, like, I don't want to live just paycheck to paycheck. I have to build some savings. And I started to figure out, like, okay, how do I budget? And financial freedom to me wasn't simply earning more, though that's certainly part of it. Financial freedom was like, how do I make sure that the way that I spend isn't going to go beyond my means? And thus, anything that I bring in that is extra as I earn more will only just be extra that I can add to my savings so that I can buy something big one day, whether that is a car, whether that is a house, whether that is some nice vacation. And so in my 20s, I was building out financial freedom and learning what my relationship with money needed to be and how every dollar that went out would be accounted for and how to make sure that I didn't spend more than I was earning. And if anything, I was spending far less than I was earning so that I could make sure that I was building a safety net and enough resources to buy bigger things in the future. In my late 20s, I realized I'm like, oh shit, I like have these 2-3 weeks of vacation a year. At the time, maybe not even 3 weeks. And I was like, this is the only time I can go do anything, or maybe a weekend. And I didn't like that notion. I was like, well, can I just work from here for a little bit? And you couldn't, right? At the time, it was like the, early 2010s. And I realized I'm like, no, I want to be able to move because I love to ski. I want to take ski vacations. I want to like be able to go camping and hiking. I want to do more things that aren't localized to the city that I was in, which was New York City at the time. And then I started thinking about, okay, how do I build more location independence into my life? And at the time, I was also considering like the city might not be it because it was just overwhelming and expensive and all these things that make New York City hard to live in, even though I grew up here. And then I started exploring. I'm like, I've always wanted to live in the country. I've always wanted to live in the mountains. I've always wanted to be like more outdoorsy and have more access to the activities that I enjoy because it was so hard to get to those things from New York. And started to think about, okay, how do I get to more location independence? And I decided to move to Montana for various reasons, but I ended up moving to Montana and I bartended initially. I ski bombed and bartended. And granted, I was tied to a location then because you had to go physically into a bar or restaurant to like go bartend, but I had a much more flexible schedule. Like I just wouldn't make money if I didn't work because I didn't have paid time off, but I could say, hey, I need this week off, these 2 weeks off, because I would then just have to trade off the money that I made. And I found after that, after I started bartending, I started freelancing and started consulting because people realized I used to work in marketing, especially working at the bar. You tell people what your past life is. And I started getting consulting projects and started to pitch. I'm like, oh shit, like now I can now do this work from anywhere. I could go ski in the morning for 2 hours, come home and work for a couple hours, or I can go to New York for 2 weeks, see family and friends, and work from there. And I started to build in like location independence into my life and really loving it and realizing that I'm like, oh shit, you have financial independence, you have location independence, and you have like the mental freedom and emotional freedom to not worry about other people telling you what you should be doing. Because throughout this time, I had plenty of friends and family, especially my mother, who was like, get a real fucking job. Like, what are you doing? You're wasting your prime years. And I was like, this is the life I want to live. I mean, when else? Right now, I get to ski anytime that I want in incredible snow with the mountain access like 20 minutes away. Like, why wouldn't I want to live this life? And the narrative, though, like definitely seeps in. You definitely still deal with the fact that, like, like friends back home, they're making so much more money than I am. They're now climbing the ladder. They're now 2 rungs, like they're, 2 levels above where I left off. I could have been there. I could be making that money. But I'm like, but they're not skiing every day when they want. They're not traveling to different places and working from there when they want. They don't get to go on a hike mid-afternoon when they want. And so the three things were starting to come together where I'm starting to build and create the pathways to the independence that I'm looking for. And I actually decided to go back to a corporate environment a few years later because what I realized in consulting, at least at the time, that consulting that I was doing, I was like, actually, there's a lot more I could learn that I'm not going to learn if I'm only helping other people do this same thing over and over. There's a lot more that I want to learn that isn't necessarily required for the consulting that I was doing, because I was doing like brand strategy consulting and marketing strategy consulting. I knew that really well and I could get better at it, but there were just things that I wanted to learn. I missed solving more dynamic, complicated problems at much bigger companies. I missed being on a team. And so another thing with building your independence is the willingness to walk away from things that feel safe and secure. The consulting thing was quite secure. I was building up my business. I was doing well. I was working from where I wanted to work. I could ski in the morning. Like I could hike in the afternoon. Like I could do a lot of things. But freedom isn't the only thing that matters. And as I started to think more about, okay, now I have financial freedom, I have location freedom, I have mental and emotional freedom, like what do I want next? Not because I had to get something, but because I was starting to feel like, oh, like something's still missing. And what was missing was a more dynamic learning environment. And so I actually limited my freedom. I took away some of my own freedom and went back into a corporate environment, but tried to find a better midway than what I had before in corporate, which was my 2-3 weeks of vacation a year and needing to be situated. In the next opportunity that I took, I went back to Nike, actually, like also dream company, another dream job that I got. Went back to Nike and I worked from the Portland like headquarters, or the Beaverton headquarters in Oregon. But I kind of negotiated a situation where I could go back to New York and work from New York, like kind of as much as I wanted, as long as it made sense for the team. And so I think ultimately I ended up going back to New York maybe like once for a week or two at a time, every month or two. And so every quarter I was going back like around 3 weeks, 3 weeks a quarter, which amounts to almost 3 months a year. And that's a really solid amount of time. And so the balance that I was striking is like, okay, I want to be back in this environment. There has to be a trade-off because I'm going back into this corporate environment and they require certain things, but how can I still maintain some of the things that matter to me? And I was able to get a lot more of the things that I was looking for: dynamic learning environment, working in teams, solving more complex problems, dealing with more kind of what felt like a bigger business impact because the businesses were so much larger. And even after I left Nike, I went to work at a full service, like, agency, like a creative marketing, innovation agency that worked with Nike as the main client. So Nike became my client. And then I had even more flexibility because we had a New York headquarters and we had clients in New York as well. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Can I pop back and forth a little bit more? And sometimes I had to fund it myself. Sometimes the company funded it. But in every situation, it was like, how do I put together the pieces that give me the freedom and the independence that I'm looking for? And after doing that for a couple of years, it was starting to near the tail end where I was like, these problems are interesting, but I'm tired of selling shit. Like I've done this my entire career. I've sold things, services that people may or may not need. And after 16 years in corporate, I was, on and off in corporate, but always, I had those ski bum years and those travel years, but on and off for 16 years, I had always worked in some kind of strategy or marketing capacity that was about getting people to spend money or make a choice that would eventually lead them to spend more money. And I was like, that's not that interesting to me anymore. And that's when I started to look into coaching. And I started my own coaching business and I realized it was really fundamentally the same job. Like I use my same strategy skills, marketing communication skills to help people understand like what is the best life for them to live? How do they align their work to what they value, the impact that they want to have? It's no different than a company. And so I went back to the trying to build my own financial freedom. I totally have independence, like my location independence. So location freedom. And every stage I'm cultivating, like, how do I make choices that make sense for me, regardless of what anyone says. Like, even to this day, like, actually, over about a year and a half ago, I decided to not scrap my coaching business, but I was like, something isn't quite right here. And I know I can grow this and I know it can get bigger, and I was doing well, but something wasn't quite right. And I decided to take time off and take a break from marketing my services the way that I was marketing it and try and figure out something new and different. I just got back from living in Spain for 3 weeks because a friend needed a house swap and I could do it last minute. They needed housing in New York. I went there. And so we just lived in each other's homes for 3 weeks. And these are the kinds of things that, like, I want it for my life. That doesn't have to look the same for everybody. I don't have a template for location independence or financial independence that everyone should follow, which isn't necessarily like the way to do it either. You have to figure out for yourself. Every single person has to figure out for themselves what makes sense for them. Take some best practices, listen to other people's stories, figure out how certain people did certain things, and then mix it into your own thing. Because now in my early 40s, like, the things that I care about are just more refined versions of what I cared about before. It was always being able to make the choices that mattered to me, that aligned with what I cared about. So mental freedom and emotional freedom, being able to not feel restricted by an environment or other people's feelings, right? That I had to constantly, like, prioritize someone else's stresses and anxieties over my own, that I could prioritize my own feelings while still being empathetic and compassionate to other people. Then location, like, being able to not be chained to a desk, right? To not be forced to go into an office every day, to be able to decide where I want to spend time as long as I had the resources to get myself there. And then financial, being able to afford the things you want to afford, but also being very mindful of what you spend. I think too often people think financial independence is solely making more. It's also spending really consciously and intentionally, making sure that the dollars you spend aren't being wasted, that they align to what you care about, your values, the businesses you want to support, the things you actually need, and that you're not buying to fuel some void, right? And all of these things are true, to not chase something to fuel a void, even if it's financial independence or location independence. Some people chase the independence for the sake of it without realizing, like I said at the beginning, what you want on the backside of getting that independence. Because once you get it, you still have to live this life. And the thing that I actually kind of took away from myself, like I said, there are trade-offs, right? About a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, I took away some financial independence for myself because I needed time. I needed space to figure out what I wanted to evolve. And now, I mean, starting YouTube videos is one of the things that I'm like, let me try this. This could be fun. But I'm not listening to a lot of best practices on YouTube because there are things that matter more to me. I don't like creating titles and thumbnails that look like clickbait. I don't like following what is the formula, even though it works, because not just because I'm contrarian, but because the way our world is evolving, it's really threatening our attention spans. It's threatening our intentionality around life. It's threatening how we are programmed to consume largely media. And I don't want to contribute to that. I would like to do it differently and do it in my own way. And if that takes me that much longer to grow, that's fine. Because there are things that I care about that trump growth at speed and scale. And so in taking some financial freedom away from myself, while I wasn't earning as much, it gave me so much freedom mentally to explore things that I wanted to explore, to test things that I wanted to test. And there are definitely stresses at times. There's definitely times where I'm like, oh my God, Pam, what did you do? You just, like, blew up your thing. And I'm like, it's okay. I know how to rebuild it. Like, I know how to get back there. I just have to do the things. but I want to do the things in a way that feel good to me so that I can fully integrate my mental, emotional, financial, location freedom. So that as I build this in this new way, I have total freedom. That when I make the money that I want to be making again, it'll be completely aligned to me in a way that is my own design. And that kind of freedom is not something anyone could give me. It's something I have to create for myself. And for you, at different stages of life, there might be different things you're after, different freedoms you're chasing. And I hope that you think really consciously about what you're trying to create for yourself and why, so that you're not just chasing a thing for the sake of it, so that you know when you attain it, what you're going to do with it. Because ideally, there's a vision that sits on the backside of all these vehicles that you're cultivating in your life to facilitate the vision that you imagined. And if clarifying that vision is something you're trying to do, or clarifying what freedom you're trying to cultivate in your life is something you're trying to do, I host weekly calls for free. There's no course, there's no like upsell. It is truly my way of trying to like give back, because I know coaching is expensive and inaccessible for a lot of people. And I don't like being in an industry where you just have to charge people, like basically the common best practice is like work with the rich, right? Or work with the people who already have means. I'm like, yeah, I will have to, because that's who will pay my bills. But there are other ways to provide resources that don't require payment. And if I want to build my business this way, where I can create a lot of free things and hopefully charge a lot for to the people who can pay, then I get to create more free things. And so the weekly call is a free thing. And if you want help clarifying any of this, I'd love to see you.